we've got we have the next LyfeMD learning series today, and this is going to be a particularly interesting webinar as we have our founder, Dr. Lorian Taylor, who will be taking us through how the FLAIR diet came about. So the FLAIR diet that is for our patients with IBD, that is a special diet that we have in LyfeMD. We'll be learning all about the beginnings of it. And then we'll be passing that on to Jackie Allen, our lead dietitian, as she is the person that most of you will be meeting. If you've had any sessions Canada-wide, Jackie does the majority of our dietitian sessions, and we have other dietitians as well for other provinces. And so we'll be hearing a little bit more from her perspective of being with patients, and with a bit of a focal point on looking at the IBD food pyramid, and we break that down and give you some practical tips of how it can be used. So I'll also say this is the most amount of people we've ever had register, which is exciting. We've got nearly 150 people that have registered for today's webinar, which is fantastic. And we hope that you gain a lot from this session. I know I always do, as I'm sort of listening to our people that are experts talk about any topic, and it'll be great to get your input. People that have submitted a question in advance, we've put those in through the program as well, and we'll be able to share answers to some of those as we get there later on. We also have our lead coach, Chelsea, who will be monitoring the chat, and she's the person that's letting you all in right now. So if you have any questions in the chat, Chelsea will be moderating that and doing her best to answer what she can, and then if not, keeping a track of what was unanswered, and so that she can circle back with you so that you are getting the answers to your questions. So the session is being recorded as well, so we will be able to share that out with people afterwards, or we'll put it on a YouTube channel so that it will be accessible for all there. And do ask you just to hang around right at the very end. The way the poll will be in this session is that when we say goodbye and the session ends, that a pop-up for a survey will be made available. We really appreciate your feedback, so please do let us know what you think, and it helps how we sort of try to plan these future webinars for you. So yeah, your input is really valuable to the session. So I've introduced who will be in the session today, and I'll sort of be going in between our two speakers, but I think if we sort of start moving on with the next slide now, and we're ready to sort of get started with the story. And we'll be hearing from Dr. Lorian Taylor about the scientific research behind the FLAIR diet, where it came from, and the 3 phases on the pathway to remission. And like I mentioned, we'll be getting Jackie's perspective a little bit more on the tips and tricks of how you can get started with the FLAIR diet. So over to you, Dr. Taylor. Lorian, it'll be lovely to hear your story about how all of this came about.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this, and really from a personal level as well as a research-based level. So about 8 years ago, which sounds like a long time, we started looking at, we started something called Ascend, which is Alberta's Collaboration of Excellence for Nutrition and Digestive Disease. And we got some through the University of Calgary and the University of Alberta. So along with my other 2 LyfeMD co-founders, who are both gastroenterologists, Dr. Maitri Raman and Dr. Panita Tandon, we started being able to raise money to really test and be able to identify what are the best nutrition as well as other types of alternative therapies for patients with IBD. We looked at particularly with IBD and IBS. And so we had looked at all of the research that was out there, and we thought, okay, we want to design our own diet and we want to test it because we think we can do this really well. So what we did is we looked at all of the research that had come out recently showing that there were diet therapies out there that were showing very positive results in terms of being able to initiate as well as lengthen remission for patients with IBD. And the diet research for around irritable bowel syndrome is much more, has been around for a lot longer and is often really a lot more accepted in the digestive disease space by gastroenterologists and even by family physicians. So this space really was new when we started working on this. There wasn't a lot of papers that had been published showing positive effects of diet. And now there's like hundreds of papers showing the positive effects that nutrition can play in the role of initiating as well as maintaining remission. So what we did is we looked through all of the existing literature. We talked to experts from all over the world, and we decided to design the diet that we thought would be optimal for the patient with IBD. And so we designed the diet together as a team. We made sure that it had the perfect balance of fat in terms of, even if you are familiar with an omega-3 and omega-6 ratio, there's different ratios that can be anti-inflammatory and other ratios that can be pro-inflammatory. So we made sure that it was the right balance of fat, the right balance of nutrients, that you made sure that people were getting their vitamins and minerals, that all of those phytochemicals were maximized in how they work together, and that we were taking out all of the challenges to the gut. So for example, one of the kind of crazier things that we did as part of this diet is we said, "Okay, we want you heating things up in glass. We want you storing things in glass containers," because there were some animal model studies that showed, okay, all these different types of plastics that we're exposed to may impact our gut. Now, I'm not saying that there is proof that those things do impact your gut, but we just took anything that was an animal study or a human study, and we created what we thought was the absolute best diet for the patient with IBD. So then we were actually selected as one of 3 teams in the world to be able to test this diet through a grant from the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, who have very generously supported our work all throughout these 8 years. So we decided to test it. And so we started recruiting patients who are in active disease and who had Crohn's disease. Now, previously to this, we had done a number of studies. So we did studies in ulcerative colitis. We looked at Crohn's disease patients and what they were eating, and then looked at their microbiomes and what foods were associated with more inflammation or worse bacteria in their gut. And so we used all that information too to put this diet together. So what our studies are showing us now, we've recruited our randomized controlled trial on this diet, isn't finished yet, but preliminary results that are being published that we're presenting at conferences have really shown that this diet is effective. So we have seen decreases in things that are markers, for example, of leaky gut that happens in inflammatory bowel disease. We've seen changes in the fatty acid composition of red blood cells to be more we're showing that their composition demonstrates that what's in the system is more anti-inflammatory than pro-inflammatory. And we've really been able to see a shift in patients' symptoms as well as their overall inflammation with diet therapy alone. So they had to stay on the same medications. They weren't allowed to change. And if any of you are out there, thank you for being involved with this work. And really, that's the basis of how we designed the FLAIR diet. We based it on our research. We based it on any research that existed. And we still really stand behind what we've been able to see with this diet over time. Now, the other problem, and I don't want to talk too long, but the other thing that we've really seen that I wanted to mention is in many IBD patients in particular, we see this extreme food restriction. So we did a study in patients. We looked 70 patients with Crohn's disease. We looked at everything they were eating. And what we found is that many people were only eating 15 foods. And when we looked at how anti-inflammatory their diet was, we found a very much lower score than a general population. Now, I can share information too, even from our app. So when we look at patients who've come in, and you may have done your anti-inflammatory diet score as one of the things you can do in our app to see where it's at, to see where your score is at. Now, most people coming into our app who have IBD are scoring around a 25. So that scale runs from 0 to 100. And we know that if you're scoring a 25, there's a lot of room for improvement that can then, you are able to maximize, you may be able to maximize the power of diet to improve your overall inflammation. We would really target a score of around 75 to 80 as someone who is really maximizing what nutrition can do for them as part of their disease. Now Jackie's going to talk about the phases of our diet. So we also have, if you've been in the app, you may have been put on the Remission diet. Now, what we published in Lancet Gastroenterology in 2021, I believe, the world's first IBD food pyramid. We did it the same way as we designed the Flare diet. We looked at every study we could. We talked to world experts, and we designed what we thought was the absolute best way for a patient with IBD to eat to maintain lasting remission. And we published this in a very, very good journal. And now what LyfeMD helps you do is it takes that food pyramid that we published. It looks at, okay, what is your anti-inflammatory score? What are you already doing that's anti-inflammatory? And we tell you, this is what you're doing that's anti-inflammatory. And then we prioritize for you what you can now eat, where you should start to focus to increase that anti-inflammatory score. So you're getting maximum impact from your diet. So that was the whole application, and why we designed LyfeMD in the first place is really to help people know what to do in an easy way and be able to access the world's best research in this area. And the world's really what we're designing as, some really, eminent researchers in this field, like Dr. Maitri Raman, my co-founder. So, and we were tired of patients coming into our practices and not being able to provide them with a solution when we were seeing there is something you can do alongside the medications that you're taking. And so what we've done with LyfeMD as well is then we've really tried to partner with medication companies so that we can make sure that patients have the best of both worlds in terms of what they're trying to do. So I'll stop there because I've probably talked too long.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lorian. And I think it shows how pioneering you and your co-founders were in the beginning to sort of set out to find some real solutions for people. I just will add, when I undertook the Flare diet, I tried to increase my gut microbiome and did was it 50 food challenge in a week or something? And my family,
30 food, yeah, the 30 food challenge, yeah.
And it was fantastic. It was so colorful. There was lots of really great foods in there. And we tried some new things in there as well that also would be not typical in our usual diet, because it was really, you said a lot of people have just a limited amount of foods in their diet. And I was also guilty of that until I actively tried to increase it. And yeah, it was good fun to take on that challenge.
Oh, I'm so glad. And, really, just as a bit on a personal side, if you've seen some of my other webinars or my story is, I went through an autoimmune issue too, and I really couldn't do much with current medical treatments. Like, I was at my max, like I'd done everything I could. And I had actually picked up the phone and said to Dr. Raman, Maitri, like, I need you to help me. I don't know what to do. And that was, and I was on the phone, picking up the phone to her almost every single day going, okay, is this inflammatory? And I'm a dietitian. Is this inflammatory? What do you think about this? Would this, is this, should I eat carboxymethylcellulose? And I'm asking, all these questions because it's the only thing I could do to help decrease the inflammation I was experiencing. And as I was experiencing that, I said to Maitri, and I said, we need to have this available for patients. It isn't fair that people don't have someone that they can go to and ask questions about when they're sick and they have very few resources outside of what they've been told in terms of some of the other information they've been given. And it's so easy to take advantage of people who are sick and looking for help. So that's a bit on the personal side of why we started LyfeMD and why we wanted to be able to offer these diets and really have focused our whole careers on trying to make these things accessible for every patient. That is my dream, that every patient would be able to access these types of therapies because they can make a big difference.
Great, thank you. I think we'll get Jackie now to sort of discuss the 3 phases of the diet, and if we can bring the slides back up again, that'll help to sort of illustrate the points that Jackie will be able to make and the purpose behind the 3 phases of the diet.
Okay, great. Give me just 1 minute to pull this up. Minute.
And see, Chelsea's just said hello to everybody to point out where the chat function is. So please do engage with Chelsea as well.
Just give me 1 minute because I think I've sort of mixed up my 2 screens.
So Charlie, does that mean that people are welcome to put questions into the chat?
Yeah, and
able
to put questions in the chat. We will take the questions that have been submitted ahead of time first. That's sort of planned for later on in the webinar. But we do, yeah, it'd be great for people to engage with Chelsea that way. And Chelsea has a wealth of knowledge that she'll be able to help share info with people. And if not, be able to keep those questions and then get back to them at a later time.
Okay, that sounds great. And 2, if people are interested in some of the research that I was talking about or staying up to date on some of the research that we're publishing about some of this, like our FLAIR diet and our Remission diet, or even some of the research studies we've done on how the LyfeMD app can help people improve, their anti-inflammatory eating score. Please, at the end of the talk today, there's a place where you can sign up for a newsletter, and please feel free to sign up for that. And because we regularly update our research as it's being published, and as we get that out for people out of our research out of the University of Calgary and University of Alberta.
Okay, I think I'm ready. Thank you for everyone. So thanks, Lorian, for that great backgrounder. And thanks for everyone who logged in today and to those listening to the recording. So today I'm really excited to just go through some of the founding principles of the FLAIR diet phases and the rationale behind those food choices. And you'll see, as you explore the LyfeMD app or online educational programs, these are the main 3 phases that we focus on in phase 1 and 2. So when someone begins their journey into the LyfeMD programs and services, we start off by providing support and education via the digital app, as well as self-paced education programs. And then we pair that with expert support from coaches, dietitians, and those people in hand are supported by Lorian and Dr. Maitri Raman, who Lorian had introduced, who is an IBD and nutrition expert, who specializes in lifestyle therapeutic interventions for digestive diseases like IBD and IBS. So the FLAIR diet has specific phases. So phase 1 and 2 are 6-week phases that are followed by a maintenance phase for long-term remission. The phase 1 and 2 help to heal the gut and lower inflammation, and they also provide essential nutrients. Phase 1 is more of an elimination type diet, where you remove the potential food triggers and focus on more tolerable formats and, blending, cooked vegetables, skins removed. And then phase 2, you're moving into more of a reintroduction phase where you've got a bit more variety, you monitor your symptoms closely. And that's usually a phase where you're having a lot of contact with the coaches or if the dietitian, if you've made that contact already. And the phases might be extended, more than 6 weeks if the symptoms are improved, but not quite ready for transition. But ultimately, the goal is to move you towards phase 3 when in remission. And then again, we just customize that for everyone. So there, again, Lorian mentioned the diets were designed with specific foods that contain high quality protein, anti-inflammatory fats, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytonutrients. And we know, like, we have evidence now showing, from not just, LyfeMD and Lorian and Dr. Rahman's work, but many other people showing that a whole foods approach can work for many people in flare and keep you in remission for longer than if you were just taking your medications alone. So the symptoms may not improve as well or fast enough without including or omitting many of these foods. So some of the foods include oats, olive oil, even potatoes, which sort of get a bad rep, I would say, with recent low carb trends. And so throughout the night, I'm going to just let you know many of dietitian secrets that I might have and little tips and tricks. And first one, I would say that I find a lot of people get a bit surprised about, although they're eating them because they tolerate them, but that potatoes are, contain a superstar compound called resistant starch. So, not only are they well tolerated, but, in IBD and flare, but they have resistant starch, which is, one of your favorite foods of your microflora in your colon. So potatoes or similar resistant starch containing foods, like green bananas, and we'll talk about a few of them. They make sure that your gut microflora get what they, the food that they need to do the job they were meant to do. And one of those things is to make anti-inflammatory compounds that directly help with inflammation in the colon. So I guess just, getting back to the diet phases, if at any point you sort of develop more flare symptoms, you can simply go back to phase 1 or 2 to kind of reset and support the healing again. And, we know you have a life to live, work, family, many, mountains to climb and goals that we have outside of work and family life. And, it sometimes makes it hard if you're not feeling well, of course, and fatigued, and also feeling overwhelmed with how to manage this. So we're here to help, you find ways to fit in the healthy choices into your routine and habits, and we customize it along the way. And we believe you, and we want to hear your story.
And Jackie, I just want to jump in there for 1 second. So
Sure.
I do want to, I just, as a bit of a caveat. So we are not saying that these diets will solve all your problems. So if you are experiencing symptoms of a flare, if you start to feel unwell, we actually ask you before you start any of these diets to confirm with your GI or your doctor that is overseeing your care to actually confirm that you're actually in a flare. So we just want to, if there, I just in case there are any GIs on the line as well, I just want you to know that we are very careful and really encourage that combination approach. So the specialty of LyfeMD is that we work with your medical team. It's not one or the other. We use both. So sorry, I just wanted to make that note.
No, that's good. It's good. Good to clarify for sure. Okay, so let's just we'll flip back here and just, if those of you who really haven't, dove into the LyfeMD flare diet at all, there's 3 food categories for the flare diet. And the essential foods are those that you are recommended to eat every day. Those will form the majority of the food that you eat. And you can track that daily in the app, or some of our programs use a PDF form, or if you just have a preference for that. But sometimes that, is a helpful way to just try and set some goals. And the app really will tabulate, how often you're meeting the essential foods. So it's really built in to make it easier. The allowed foods are foods that can be eaten, but they're not required. And so it might be beverages, spices, other flavoring agents, and also just extra options for more variety. And then you've got the avoid foods, which are those best to be avoided as they can make the symptoms or inflammation worse. And we want you to have that best chance at success. So we know that, options are sometimes, unavailable, or life can be unpredictable. So that's where you can reach out to coaches and dietitians to help troubleshoot, how to minimize those foods. And then you can also track that in the app like you would the essential foods. So I guess I would say, my next RD tip of the night would be just, if you are getting started on this, you're already in this. First off, if you don't have a grocery list, that's a good way of making sure that you have all the foods you need. And I would say right away, throw on those essential foods onto your grocery list. And don't forget frozen options too, because that is always a good backup if you do run out. All right, so this slide, don't be afraid of this slide. It's pretty technical. And the area that I want you to really focus in on is more just looking, again, we've got sort of the left and the right-hand side would be, the LyfeMD Flare diet, or that type of style diet, and then an ultra-processed Western diet on the right-hand side. So if you go down to sort of the middle area, you can see that sort of our gut mucosa, the layer, the epithelial, cell layer that's in our lining our colon. And on the left, you can see the main point here is just that it's much more robust and healthy looking. On the right, you can see, things are not looking quite as healthy, and there's more of a dysfunctional intestinal barrier. And so when we add more of these foods, anti-inflammatory fats, fruits, vegetables, resistant starch, healthy proteins, we're going to see more three main things would be increased secretion of antimicrobial compounds, improved microbiome diversity, and a healthy mucus layer. So we, end up seeing less inflammatory markers in the blood and tissues, less leaky gut symptoms, and food intolerances. Yeah, so that's basically, I wanted to share that just as a quick picture, not to scare you, but just to see, like, this is sort of one of the reasons why, and why a lot of the foods were chosen. Okay, I'm going to jump into the food pyramid then. And if you have any questions along the way, again, just keep putting them in the chat and we will, answer them as best as we go. Chelsea's on that. And also we can always add them in at the end. And if we run out of time, answering all of them, we can make sure we get an answer to people. So okay, so the IBD pyramid, basically this in its current form is an evidence-based model that, Lorian had shared that guides how much and what types of foods to include to help support healthy gut function and a diverse microbiome that helps keep you in remission longer when used together with your anti-inflammatory medications. So this pyramid concept means, again, just in general, the pyramid concept is that the bottom, which is the larger portion, is the amount of foods that will be more of your base, that you'll have more of. It doesn't mean that the top categories are not as important. There'll just be a bit of a smaller volume of the food that we eat. And we modify this pyramid for the flare phase 1 and 2. So when this diet was being designed, it was thought, we want to try and get as many of these diverse plant foods in, but we're going to put them in a more tolerable format. So they're going to be digested more easily, and we'll continue, to include some of the foods that traditionally, many of you might have, have removed from your diet, while in flare or had. And so we want to make sure, that we try and include them, but in a more of a modified format, so that we can maintain that microbiome's healthy balance. And, really the recommended gold standard therapy for IBD in a recent large North American IBD diet literature review that came out in January does support this approach now. So consistency is key here, and that's where coaches and dietitians really shine. They can decode the info if you're struggling and help you prioritize the goals. And we hear that all the time, that people are really happy that they've met, and it's not that we're just maybe clarifying some of the goals when you feel a little overwhelmed with where to get started. And I would say, like, all the LyfeMD recipes include the essential foods. So if you are, not sure how to incorporate these into your own recipes, then you can try out a bunch of the recipes and just know that you've got tasty recipes to look forward to. My next tip, I guess, would be that when you're in flare especially, is to include healthy fats and protein with every single meal and snack. And sometimes it's hard to figure out how to do that. And for me, a real easy fix that I love to bump up protein and anti-inflammatory fats is to just sprinkle hemp seeds onto everything, the hemp hearts. So if you haven't tried them and you're not familiar with them, they're just really kind of a neutral flavor, really well tolerated in IBD. And you can just, whatever meal you're having, sprinkle it on, put it into smoothies, ground meat dishes, pretty much everything. And I, usually suggest to my clients to have keep a container of them in your fridge door, maybe a clear container so you can see it, and just give a shake of hemp seeds onto many different things and try it out. Oops. Okay, so I'm just going to go through each of the sections of the food pyramid here just to, highlight. But again, we're not going to go through a big extensive list, but, when you want to dive into this a little more, it's all in the app. And or if you're doing an online program, you're going to be given this in the educational materials. So the bottom pyramid, would be your fruits, vegetables, and leafy greens. And we also have, so within that, we'll be giving you sort of the essential, allowed, and the avoid foods. And portions are somewhat customized for different calories, but, and we also have a long list of substitutions. So if there's foods that you see on it that you really don't like or you can't tolerate, then we can make some substitutions there and customize it for you. So, up on the right-hand side, we've got the green bananas. And the reason why it's green, I mentioned the resistant starch, which is part of, that superfood, I would say, that the microflora really like. So that's going to be more on the green versus a ripe banana. We've got other foods to include as essential choices in flare phase 1. So a peeled apple. So we remove some of that insoluble fiber that often, can cause more symptoms. But we also include things like berries, and then encourage you to change the format. So purees, soups, smoothies, sauces, curries. It's just sort of, whatever format that you're can tolerate a little bit better and absorb more of those nutrients. And then there's also other allowed foods that might give you, if you've already finished your essential choices for the day and you're looking for more, add, say, melon, and there's different choices that we would show that you may tolerate. So phase 2, we're just going to be shifting then into adding some more, a little bit more onto the essential food list. Things like, pears, raspberries, blackberries can be added. And also on top of that, you're allowed to go on to having almost all fruits, but we just look at portions and we can give you guidance. So if you don't see it in the resources, usually it means, hold off until the next phase, but that's also where you can connect with a coach or dietitian to clarify. Then we get to remission, and it really opens up so you're increasing your fruit and vegetable intake and variety. You've got smoothies, soups, salad, and maybe experimenting with more raw types of vegetables. And we start with small portions. So I wanted to include a picture to just show what I meant, when we're talking leafy greens, especially because this is one that, we're sort of worried. People often come worried about greens, and I would say, try and, think about it again, think about changing the format, start slow, keep moving forward. We're going to be moving, from flare and to, thinking about as you transition out of flare, maybe, we can try experimenting with cooked and whole. But again, we're going to be, just looking at including them if we can, and because we know that diversity is key for the microbiome. And getting like all the great antioxidant benefits. So if you have strictures, though, this is something that's really important, that you want to make sure to watch out for the stringy vegetables, whole greens. And so, if your gastroenterologist has recommended to avoid certain foods, by all means, like that is that's going to be the top recommendation. So for strictures, we do have a handout that you can find in the app, and we can also provide that to you as a PDF if you need that. So here I'm going to point out just one of my favorite habits, I guess, that, more of a personal habit that, working with LyfeMD has influenced my food choices too. And I just think it's a really easy way to sort of get more of the greens in, is just, again, remember frozen. So the frozen spinach pucks, I have those in my freezer. I buy at least 2 bags at a time. So that's sort of my secret. And then when that first bag is empty, then I reach, that's when I replace it. So I throw it into soups, stir fries, eggs, ground meat dishes, smoothies. It's just sort of giving yourself that little extra bump in a more tolerable format. And again, just getting more variety. And as far as recipes, feel free to, if you want to know, well, how, not really crazy about spinach, but, you're willing, maybe open to trying it. We have some really good recipes. And so you just go into the app to the chef's hat and look into, I'll give you 4 ones to look into. There's green rice, green goddess dressing, which is delicious, and then creamy green smoothie, and then sauteed greens, which is more of a, not a pureed format. So those are a few favorites.
I think, Jackie, after I put spinach and brownies, I think we might have taken that recipe out. That wasn't a real favorite. And I know
it was a little too dietitian-y, maybe.
No, and I can't see anyone's faces, but as soon as I said spinach and brownies, I just know what you look like. And I'll, another time I'll tell you the story about the black bean brownies that I made and all of the problems that caused as well. Anyway, I'll let you continue.
Well, yes, and I know about black bean brownies. I have recently had one recently. I was like, oh, this is going to be so great. It was very moist. It was tasty, but it was not the same. So, I would say, sometimes these things are good to try. And that was one of my points later on, is even just to be curious, to see sometimes these things work and sometimes they don't. So, okay, so the next one, the big focus, I guess, and we were talking about resistant starch, and is just to include daily resistant starch. Oh, was there someone? Okay, I just heard someone talking. I thought it was you, Charlie. So including daily resistant starch. So basically, this is where, the cooling, reheating, and even repurposing starchy foods can increase the resistant starch content. And again, remember, the microflora love it. And so reduction, another thing, sorry, to point out, is the reduction of gluten in phase 1. So, as Lorian said, that we took a most cautious approach. The LyfeMD Flare diet really is, bringing out a lot of foods that, people just often anecdotally find, or there may be a potential for it to cause more symptoms. So that's something, you can always customize alongside, with your coach and dietitian. But reducing the gluten content in this phase 1 was just sort of that best option for that first 6 weeks. So again, up in the right-hand corner, you see there the Flare kind of foods that you're going to have as essential choices would be cooked white rice, a lot of like rice and oats, and potatoes would be sort of the main focus. Phase 2, it shifts where you could include, some more foods. So you can experiment with some legumes, maybe, pureeing first to trial small portions, or, even a slice of whole grain bread instead of having more of the oat and rice-based foods. And in remission then, we're switching then to whole grains, pasta, maybe experimenting with putting, the skins back on some of the fruits and vegetables and different whole grains. And adding back more of the gluten type foods, if that's your preference. So, more variety again, more diversity for your gut microflora. And, going back to the oats, I've had many people, they say, well, I don't really like oatmeal. So one of the things I would suggest, is go into the app, search for oats, and just see what you find, because there's some really good things in there that aren't just oatmeal. you know, you can throw a handful of oats into a smoothie, so you don't even notice it's there. But you can have baked oatmeal and the breakfast cookies, and those are really delicious. And again, you can make a big batch and have leftovers. So, you know, cooking more from scratch, so you're not doing it every single day. And I wanted to point out also, just for safety, not related to IBD, but would be that if you're having more rice, there is, you know, more research showing recently that soil content has arsenic and it can contaminate the rice. So we do recommend that you rinse your rice until the water runs clear, or to rinse it 3 times. Also with potatoes, they contain, if they get green or they're sprouted, they have higher contents of solanine, which is a carcinogen. So again, just store the potatoes in dark rooms, and, you know, cold dark room, and just don't eat the green. You can peel it off, and don't eat the sprouted potatoes. Okay. So, and our next thing is just talking about homemade food. So prepping more, you know, batch cooking, meals and snacks, and then, you know, repurposing food. So, you know, I think, you know, thinking about cooking in larger amounts means, again, it's going to cool and you'll heat it up, either to, you know, to have that next day meal or to repurpose it. So for example, you know, you've cooked potatoes or rice, you could make those into a potato salad or rice salad. We have a really good potato salad recipe in there. Potato patties, so you'd mix, you know, mashed potato or sweet potato with a protein like fish, ground meat, or even some, you know, chopped cooked greens, pan fry it or bake it. So another example would be, say, day one, you have a double or triple portion of your baked salmon and roasted sweet potatoes. And then the next day you're making it into sweet potato cakes. So where we have here, there, I threw a little picture up, and that is, you know, one of our recipes in there is a salmon cake, baked salmon cake. So, sorry, it's called sweet potato salmon cakes. So I give you the right name. Another example would be just baked chicken dinner, and then the next day it becomes a salad or a soup. So if you're just struggling with that, like, please reach out to us, and that's where, you know, having a session can help. And then I want to point out in the top right-hand slide, we've got food additives that we want to try and avoid. So going through that list, I won't read through it, but basically these will be in the resources. And, you know, it's just, you know, looking through your ingredients and looking at food labels a little more. And we can always help, you know, send us a screenshot of your label, and you can say, I'm not quite sure, can you help me out with this? And we do this all the time to support clients figuring out how to, you know, remove these. All of those ingredients, there has been evidence in research studies to show inflammation in the gut. They may be animal studies, as, you know, Lorian has mentioned, but again, just being really cautious with the LyfeMD Flare diet approach to just get the best results. Okay, and then last but not least, or the last 2 areas here would be choosing healthy proteins. And again, it's sort of, you know, looking at proteins that help with inflammation and healing. Those ones are included in the Flare diet, and the ones that hinder are, you know, recommended to avoid or limit. So things like red meat, beef, and pork is included in that, and then processed meats. And so you'll see a lot of, you know, eggs, chicken, turkey, fatty fish, and also almond butter or flour. You can include those hemp hearts. You can include collagen powder. That's sort of in your allowed foods. And then phase 2, it does open the door up a little bit more to have some red meat if you'd really love to have that. You know, it's the iron content, the saturated fat that is more pro-inflammatory there. And then remission, we're going to be, again, just opening it up to more formats. And so instead of, a lot of people are worried about nuts and seeds. Well, you know, if we have it more as a nut butter or a nut flour, like as in almond flour, then, you know, that can be something that you might tolerate better. And then you're getting all those benefits of the healthy fats. And I'm showing a picture here because this is, you know, another kind of, you know, tip I would say for tonight is that, you know, these are almond flour cookies. And They have only 4 ingredients in them: almond flour, sugar, salt, and water. You can add spices, like cinnamon, vanilla, ginger, things like that. There's also almond flour pancakes. So just, almond flour, counts as a protein as well here in this phase.
That, just so you know, those cookies were designed by Charlie's wife, Silja. So
Oh, really? Okay, excellent.
Because Charlie actually did the Flare diet, and he was wanting something sweet. This is before we had all the recipes. And so Silja designed the almond cookies as something that Charlie could eat as part of his Flare diet.
Excellent.
I thoroughly enjoyed them. And I think when we just get down, there's a couple of slides ahead talk about desserts. I might just sort of jump in and just share how I managed that sweet part of the day when I was on the Flare diet and needing a bit of a boost.
Perfect. So I guess, just the last part of the pyramid, the very top is the fat, and just really wanted to point out again, I think we hear this a lot with heart disease, but, with inflammatory bowel disease, the type of fat also matters, and other inflammatory conditions. So, extra virgin olive oil is really emphasized, avocado, and then really trying to shift away from animal fats because they are more pro-inflammatory. Some dairy fat can be fine, and we know that some of it is actually, part of it is essential to sort of helping to process the other types of fats that you're taking in the diet. But we just don't, we've sort of reduced a lot of that with the Flare diet. And not all, I guess, the tip here with olive oils is that not all olive oils are created equal. You want to choose extra virgin olive oil. You want to choose cold pressed. It has the highest polyphenol content for antioxidant power. And if you can find ones that are independently analyzed, they'll have a certificate of authenticity. It ensures the quality of the oils. And this doesn't mean, so just, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us, send a screenshot of what you have and see, is this okay? And no high heat. You always want to leave it at low heat or no heat. You can drizzle it onto meals if you're not using it in your cooking, put into the potatoes, that type of thing. Okay, and one more point I just wanted to share, because some people, when you're doing the Flare diet, again, a thing that we find is that, the dairy foods, a lot of people already actually come and they're not tolerating them. But sometimes people aren't sure what's causing, more of the symptoms. So I would just say, be curious, try out dairy alternatives when you're in Flare. It's not forever, it's for 6 to 12 weeks. So, and then you may be able to tolerate that. Again, the lactose is just something that sometimes in Flare, you're just not going to tolerate as well. So we try and eliminate that out for the first 6 weeks. And then in phase 2, we add in a bit more fermented dairy, so yogurt, kefir, and in Remission, it opens up a bit more, and it's really based on your tolerance. And I guess we're going to move into questions, but I just wanted to close with saying, we know that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work, which is why you've come to us. Like, many of us have had this same experience with our own health journey. And we know that when you come here, you're going to start with an outline, and then we customize it based on your specific health journey and your needs. The last thing we want you to feel is that we simply handed you a diet sheet and left you off to make changes on your own. We're here every step of the way. And so come book in with a coach or dietitian, and we'll make that process less scary. And the dessert slide. So there, Charlie, you could take it away, and then I can always add anything.
I was going to say, you can't skip to the questions without just gloss over this slide because it looks too delicious too. But when I was in the Flare diet, one of the highlights of the day was the finishing part of the dessert, because I didn't have the same snacks and create, the same bits of food, the highly processed foods that I knew wouldn't be good for me, like chocolate bars. I know that I wasn't supposed to have those, so I really enjoyed having fried bananas and almond butter, and having berries with those as well. So it's getting my blue foods in. And that became like a family favorite dessert every evening, to sort of cook up the bananas like that. And my wife also found the almond she kind of made up the almond recipe for the cookies there. And I think it was a really great way of showing how it can be really difficult to do by yourself, but it can also be easy to embed as a family. And I know one of the questions that we have is someone said that I'm a mum, how do I do this with a family? There were so many of the recipes that were really tasty for everybody that we try to make it a part of what we did for everybody. And so my family were with me during the same time. And the resistant starch was a great way for, that was a huge learning for me. And I might just end up cooking my rice or potatoes earlier on in the day so that I would be able to absorb all that resistant starch and get the benefits of that. And I just see someone has asked about the nutritional yeast, and that was also another saving grace to sprinkle that on top of salads, because then it tasted really, or it was almost like my cheese substitute then. And I think the nutritional yeast that Chelsea said, yep, that's okay. That was another really great tip that I enjoyed during that phase of the diet as well. And we do now have your questions that you've come through. We've got 10 minutes left, so we'll have to kind of quick fire go through them so that we can kind of get to everything. But I think one of the main points that I'm hearing here is you know where to get the support from, okay? You know how to get the support through your dietitian or a LyfeMD dietitian or one of the coaches. Just ask away and we can tailor things for you. So without well, if we move on to the next slide, please, Jackie, and then I'll read the question, and then Jackie or Lorian will be able to answer, because I know some of you might be have your phone propped up somewhere and listening to this and not be reading what's on the slide at the same time.
So, Charlie, can I just bump in here quickly, because there was one more with the desserts. Someone had asked about what is the best way to satisfy sweet cravings while on the flare diet or any diet. So just while we're talking about sweets, I thought, maybe I should just jump in and answer that one.
Sure.
So the one thing I was just going to say with any of these, and maybe from your experience too, you can say, but just pairing your sweets with a protein, and that can even be like the hemp hearts, things like that work really well. And once fibers are being tolerated, some fiber can help. Also, just having regular meals and enough fluid to make sure you're feeding your body first, and then consider working with the dietitian or coach to better understand your cravings and like what might be contributing to them, and then learn how to modify that behavior. So, sweet cravings can be a bit more complicated, but sometimes it's as simple as just making sure you have that structure to your day and figuring out to add something else that's going to be really satisfying and filling.
Okay, great. Okay, so the first question, I guess if you are on a plant-based diet and vegan, that you'll have to come off it to do this diet.
All right, so I can take that. So I would say definitely, no, not necessarily. We can definitely customize that and work with a, coach and dietitian on that, and just giving you tips and advice. The first 6 to 12 weeks, are a lot lower in insoluble fiber, which can make it a little bit harder, but, things like tofu, hemp seeds, nut butters, and flour, like those can be foods that can help and be a replacement for some of the like legumes. Again, sometimes we're just modifying that anyway, maybe more blending them. And maybe a bit more troubleshooting, but if that's something that's really important to you to remain on a vegan diet, then we're going to work with you on that. And there are vegan oral nutrition products on the market now in Canada. So if you that can be another option too, to help get some of that nutrition in addition, sort of do a combination approach to reduce the fiber as well.
Thank you. Next question. Being a mother, how can you adapt the flare diet to be able to not make different meals from your family? I know the specific question had a daughter with celiac and a mum in Crohn's in remission with strictures. Yeah. So it's there's a bit to that question.
Yeah. So I think, it definitely is like a little bit of a, like with any household, you've got likes and dislikes to sort of satisfy. But then it becomes ultimately like more important if, someone has celiac, someone doesn't. I mean, the good news, I would say, like you can pretty much eat gluten-free for the whole family and have really health promoting foods that are gluten-free already and tasty. And things like strictures, like maybe, we're just sort of making the same kind of meal, but then we're modifying the format somewhat. So maybe we're, making a stew and then we're taking out some and just blending and up a little bit more so it's more tolerable if it has, stringy type vegetables and greens in it. But again, a lot of those foods that you could have in a stricture, anyone can have. So it's sort of a matter of just, learning what, is needed for both of the health conditions and marrying those two. So things like spinach, putting it into the rice, putting it into the potatoes and things like that, where you might be able to, have the spinach in a different format with the stricture. And I would say, like, again, if you were making, say, like a smoothie, for example, and you're making it for children and you're thinking, well, they're not going to have it once I put that spinach puck in. So, it's trying. One reminder I like to tell people is just that with development and children's eating habits, it may take 40 introductions of a food before they acquire that taste. So don't give up. The shift, in our dietary pattern, to more industrialized, fast foods is putting children also at higher risk for IBD and chronic diseases. So, if that's kind of the situation you're dealing with, then it may be a matter of like just, trialing it, or, take some of it out and then put in your spinach puck, and then, each person is getting what they need. And batch cooking, that could be another thing, making foods. I've had people where they'll make a bigger portion for themselves and then, they're all modifying, which they're cooking kind of maybe every couple days or maybe once a day, but one day they're doing a batch cooking that's going to do their own meals. And the other day, maybe some of the foods, if someone has like really strong dislikes, compared to the foods that you would like to eat. And ask for help. That would be a big one. I would say, they're support people. It may be someone in your home. It may be a friend, family member who really doesn't mind. They love baking and they're going to be happy to make the little like hemp oat bites for you. So, just remember that there are those people around who might be willing to help.
Okay, we don't have much more time here, but I believe, Lorian, you were going to take the next question about how do pro or prebiotics affect things, or do they?
Yeah, it's a good question and I'll specifically refer to IBD as well as IBS. I know we're almost out of time. I did want to mention though, for the family, one of the best things I ever did, my kids eat no fruits and vegetables. I was the dietitian in Alberta who wrote the very first pamphlets for provincial on how to get your kids to eat fruit and vegetables. That was before I had kids. Now I have kids that don't eat fruits and vegetables. So one thing that I've done that makes it so they can't pick stuff out, I'm very tricky, is I bought a chopper. So it's this thing you can buy from Bed Bath & Beyond or Superstore, and it has these tiny little squares that you can just use like this. It goes like this and it chops everything up for you into tiny little pieces so they can't tell it's in there. It's like been our family's saving grace around getting my kids to eat fruits and vegetables. That's one tip from someone who is always trying to sneak stuff in. And they make me sometimes swear about ingredients that are in food because they're so worried about what I put in it. But anyways, so pro and prebiotics, I'm just going to talk very briefly. I really encourage anyone who's interested in this area to download an app called Clinical Guide to Probiotics. It's excellent. It's evidence-based. It's what most of the dietitians in the country that I know use when they get questions about pro and particularly around probiotics and should I be on one. For IBD, there is some probiotic recommendations, but only for ulcerative colitis. There's been no evidence suggesting that probiotic therapy helps patients with Crohn's disease. So the one that we regularly recommend as part of LyfeMD would be Visbiome, but there's a couple others that are also recommended in that clinical guide. And they actually have all the research studies listed under the probiotic. So you can go in and read for yourself what is the evidence for that probiotic in ulcerative colitis. They do have other indications for other things like mental health, weight loss. There's a number of different ones for IBS. They're all listed in that clinical guide. Really what we find is results really do vary. Even with IBS, I think Natasha Haskey, who's one of our, a real expert on microbiome, she says typically the probiotics may only work 20 to 30% of the time or make symptoms 20% better. And it really needs that diet, mental health, type of a stress management type of approach, especially for IBS, and a lot of symptom pain. So it might not be worth the money, but you know what? If it makes you feel better, maybe you're one of those people who just really can respond to that probiotic. So that would be what I would recommend for that.
Yeah, and I just would add too that, again, with most of the probiotics, like if you try it and after a week or two, you're not noticing a difference, generally we would say you're not going to. So you don't need to necessarily continue, but it's, if you would like to try it and, you can discuss that with your, healthcare professionals, but, try it and see if you want to.
Thank you. If we move on to the next slide, please, Jackie, as we're at 5 o'clock now. And the next one, we will see that there's a question about how do we get some support from a LyfeMD dietitian. So if we're interested in booking a consultation with a LyfeMD dietitian, this QR code will take you to our booking page for the suitable province that you are in. And that's the answer. This is how you are going to end up speaking with, most likely for your own private consultation with Jackie, or depending on another province, who it could be. We also have French-speaking dietitians in Quebec, if anybody is calling in from there as well. So that is the answer for you right there, and I hope that that's of use for you. There's different times that you can book to see a dietitian, and then you're sort of getting something that's really tailored for you. And we hope that that's something that you can utilize. And as a reminder as well, many insurance plans through work will also have coverage for a dietitian. So that is something to worth consider, so that it's not entirely out of pocket and that it comes through, you claim it through your insurance fund. And I think benefits, I kind of think it's the overseas thing that I'm missing here, and I'm sort of confusing that insurance and benefit package. And then Lorian mentioned the last thing we had, that you have an opportunity to register for our monthly newsletter. So that's how you sign up here. And this is where we often publish articles. We've got articles in there about the resistant starch that you've heard today. We've had some about the lycopene that you can get from tomatoes. There's a variety of great resources in there, and they get updated every month. And we'll sort of also link you to what our trending recipes are as well, so you can sort of get access to those. And that brings us right to the end of our webinar. I see we've still got some new questions coming in. So Chelsea, you've been pretty busy by the looks of things today. And Lorian, thank you for jumping in as well and answering the questions in the chat as well. And just to make sure that we've had a chance to answer those. Yes, we've got the post-webinar survey. Thanks for that reminder, Chelsea. So that will appear when we end the survey. So we'll end it now. Please give us your thoughts and feedback so that we know how to make it better for you next time. Okay, thank you everybody for joining. I found that really interesting today. Hopefully you all did as well. There were so many wonderful bits that were shared by Lorian and by Jackie. We're really lucky to have them as such a great team that we are at LyfeMD. And that's one of the emphases I'd like to make is when you are meeting with Jackie, you're getting the power of the whole team behind you. And that's something that Dr. Taylor mentioned as well, by saying, we're not trying to replace your GI. We're trying to work together with you in harmony to sort of create the best solutions for you. And that's what our goal is here. So please do let us know your feedback so that we know how to keep on improving our services for you. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And it was lovely to sort of spend this Tuesday afternoon with you. Okay. So please answer that now, and we'll end the